they are in now. So you as parents probably know your children better than anyone else, unless it's been a long time since you've been able to be with them. Hi, Heather. Many factors form personality. We make a distinction between temperament and personality, and I'll explain that to you in just a minute. When we talk about discipline, discipline comes from the word disciple, which means to teach. So we're going to try and tailor the discipline approaches we use to the children's temperament. There is an approach for every child, no matter how complex, no matter what's going on. And we know that our babies don't come with instructions. We need to learn how to be parents. And so we're going to offer some information tonight that's gleaned from this. I've been working for fathers programs for the past 30 years. And before that, I worked with men who were batters, who battered their female partners. So most of my work has been with fathers, but fathers and mothers together or alone really shape the behavior of children. And so we're going to look at what those are. So tonight we're going to look at what temperament is and how to apply it. That's why I asked you, if you got the works, it's called the temperament worksheet as an attachment to what I sent you. If you have a chance either to print it out or to view it as we're talking, this will help you be able to address some specific situations with your children or grandchildren. We can parent with temperament in mind. I have 3 grown children. My youngest, Hannah, we adopted at birth, and Hannah was born cocaine exposed and fetal alcohol effect. Hannah's temperament was severely impacted by what her birth mom put in her during her pregnancy, during the 9 months. So my wife and I tailor how we work with our daughter, even though she's 24, with high functioning Asperger's. We still need to use a very specific approach because of her mood swings. And when we do this, we can really have more success with our children and grandchildren. There are 10 traits we're going to look at tonight, and those are all listed on that temperament worksheet that was sent to you. We're going to look at strengths in looking at temperament in children. We can look at what's wrong with kids, but when we look at their strengths, a lot of times we can then see ways we can approach to help them, not just with discipline, but with communication and all other aspects of child raising. We're going to try more descriptions and not so much labeling of children. We're also going to distinguish between discipline and punishment. Discipline teaches. Children who are punished tend to follow the rules out of fear. Children who are disciplined learn these and tend to internalize them. They make them part of who they are, and they tend to grow up healthier and less violent and less defensive than children who were punished a lot as they were growing up. We'll also talk about how we can avoid or prevent temperament problems. And we'll identify some specific problem behaviors. And I'll ask you to think of specific problem behaviors you see in one or more of your children and how we might be able to do that. So, every child is born with a temperament. Children are born with a temperament. You can't change the child's temperament. You can change a child's personality. Temperament itself isn't good or it's bad, but it's what they're born into. And we'll explore the 3 main temperament types. The basic temperament remains throughout life. So the temperament you're born with, or each of your children are born with, that's who they are throughout their life. Temperament has a lot to do with how we behave and how others perceive us. So I'm going to ask you to do this. If you have something to write on, do this. I'd like you to write down 5 words that how other people would describe you. 5 words or phrases. This can be someone you work with. It can be one of your siblings, your parents, your older children, but 5 words or phrases of how people close to us would see us. How would they describe us? All right. Anyone want to say a couple of the words that how people who know you and are close to you would describe you? Heather?
Neil, I'll share out.
Okay.
First I did hilarious, like sarcastic, being funny, and then out of the 3, it ended up to being mean and ruthless. I don't know. I don't know if it's too many jokes or too many.
And you're laughing at this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I asked you to be honest. Okay. Good for you. All right. Anyone else?
I think I care.
Okay.
Yeah, I say,
Yes.
that I would think mine's would be weird. I tend to act weird, funny, outspoken, and Carrie.
All right.
I can't find the last one to fit.
That's all right. Mine would be busy, dedicated to family, short-tempered, too often, humorous, and focused. Anyone else? All right. So as you see, that this term here says temperament has a great deal to do with how we behave and how others perceive us. How we behave in our daily life is how people perceive us from a young child on. So second little assignment, I'd ask you to pick one of your children or one of your grandchildren, just one, and write down some words that would describe that child. How would people who know him or her describe that child? Anyone want to offer some of the terms or phrases or words to describe one of your children or one of your grandchildren?
I will.
Okay.
This one's to my oldest son. I say they would say he's awesome. He's a cute little, like stout little boy, and
Okay.
he's very outspoken. And they like to name him, since he's the first grandson. They like just looked at him and they're like, "Oh, his grandson!" They just know off the bat who they're talking about.
All right.
And very loving.
Okay. Thank you. One more. Anybody else?
You guys?
Ryan or Ferlin?
Yeah.
Mine are just funny, athletic, just fearless, I think.
Fearless?
My granddaughter.
All right. Well, good. So this is, okay, yes. Grandson talks a lot. Curious. Went away.
Oh, let me see. Grandson talks a lot, curious and likes to explore things he wants to know. Forgetful.
Forgetful. Okay, thank you,
Marcella.
Marcella. All right, so we're starting to get into understanding a little bit about temperament. Now, there are different theories, but one of the most prominent research teams says there are three temperament styles. There's the easygoing or flexible child. There's the quiet or slow to warm child. And there's a feisty or spirited child. So as we go through these descriptions, you might see how this would apply to you or to one of your children or grandchildren. So temperament is a set of 10 traits that explain the how of behavior. So we're going to go through each of the 10 traits, like I said, that are listed on your temperament worksheet. I'll ask you to score where they would fall. With parenting with temperament in mind, we're going to look at the different types of interactions between the parent and child, or parent to parent, or child to child. We're also going to look at some ways that are more effective in parenting when we have our temperament of our child in mind. Since we're the adults, it's our responsibility as a parent to tailor, to modify our parenting approach. We're the adult, so rather than just saying no or stop, the idea is that we can take this information and address it to the child that reflects their temperament. As the adult, that's our responsibility. So we're going to look at the 10 traits. I'm going to ask you to assess your own temperament, to assess your child, one of your children's temperament. And the easiest combinations are mid-range. If you look at your temperament worksheet, the scoring goes from 1, which is low, to 10, which is high. And it's up to you to decide how you would apply that to each of your children. So a suggestion would be, as you look at that worksheet, at some point, put where you fall on each of these 10 traits. You can do this with initials. You could do it with one person being an X, and another an O, and a third one a diamond or a star or whatever. What I'd suggest is picking yourself and one or two or more of your children or grandchildren. And as we go through these 10 traits, put on there where they would generally fall in the average. As it says, the easiest combinations are in the middle, the 4, 5, and 6. So if you're a 4 or 5 and your children are 4 and a 5 in some of these traits, there's going to tend to be less conflict and less chaos. The most volatile interactions are those where you're on one end and your child's on another. Now remember, temperament is inborn. You don't have a choice. This is what you're born with. But we can teach children all kinds of skills so their temperament allows them to flourish. They don't have to be condemned because of their birth situation. Also, there can be lots of likenesses. When there are lots of likenesses, you can see a lot of humor, a lot of activity, a lot of theatrics. If you have extreme opposites in a lot of these traits, you're going to be busier as a parent. You can still teach them skills that they need to learn so they can fit in, and you can fit in, obviously. And the combinations are endless, but they're also fascinating when we look at the scale of 1 to 10 on the child's level for each of these traits. So here are some of the 10 of the traits. The activity level of you, the activity level of one of your children. To be simple, you might start with just thinking of yourself and one of your children, but you could also do more. But generally, what is your activity level and what is one of your children's activity? The second of the 10, we're going to go into each of these. How adaptable are you and they to different situations? The third one, do you tend to jump in or withdraw under certain circumstances? The fourth one is how distractible are you, or how distractible is the child? And the fifth one actually has two components. Emotional sensitivity refers to how the person is sensitive themselves to understanding what's going on inside them. And emotional sensitivity is also how sensitive are they to other people? Do they really tune in and care about other people, or do they just say what's on their mind? Sixth one has to do with the intensity of responses to different situations. The seventh has to do with how persistent a person is. Are they easily frustrated, or can they attend to a task? Could somebody mute? It's pretty loud. Thank you. The eighth is the quality of the mood. Are you, or is that one of your children basically usually pretty positive or usually pretty negative? Is the glass half full or half empty? The ninth one has to do with how regularly the person attends to their bodily needs. Do you regularly get hungry at the same time, thirsty at the same time, tired at the same time, or go to bathroom at the same time? These have to do with our body rhythms, how regular we are. And the 10th one is our sensory awareness of the 5 senses. Does light affect our mood? Do smells really affect our mood? Does touch affect our mood? So again, we're going to explore each of these 10 and then look at how we could temper the discipline style to each of these. So first one is the activity level. So take a look at your temperament worksheet, and it says right on there, activity level. Typically, how do you fill your leisure time? If all of a sudden you found you had a whole afternoon with no responsibilities for kids or grandkids or a job, you didn't have to do things around the house, you didn't have to, what would you do? Would you take a bath? Would you relax? Would you go for a run or a bike ride? Would you play a game, like a video game? When you have leisure time, what do you like to do? What's your level of activity or relaxation? Look at your children as you're doing this on one or more of your children or grandchildren. Are they typically on the go, or are they more calm? Do they need someone to stimulate and amuse them, or can they take care of themselves and seek out activities for themselves and by themselves? Same thing on for your child. Are you typically seen as on the go or more idle? So on that worksheet, the low activity is calm and slow moving. The high activity level is wild and quick moving. So for a child with high energy, you need to tune into their signals that it's time for them to blow off steam and find a way to let her do that. What's a productive way for a 2-year-old to let off steam versus maybe a 7-year-old versus maybe a 12-year-old? Take some activity time during the day. Maybe walk to school instead of driving, or stop at the park on the way to the grocery store. With kids with high activity levels, this is what they're going to need to do. And confinement doesn't work with them. A 15-minute timeout for a kid with high activity level is torture. So you wouldn't want to do that. So look at the activity level of one or more of your children and yourself and put that on the worksheet. Where do you generally fall on average? Are you high level, medium level, or low level of activity? For a child that's really low energy, you want to give them more time to attend to a task. If they've got to tie their shoes, if they're going to help with like clearing the table after dinner, if they're going to be working on homework, if they're going to be doing something that's fun, typically they need more time to set up an activity and participate in it because they have lower energy. One other suggestion, use a timer to set a goal for when a chore should be finished. Some homes have egg timers that ding, or have the sand that runs up and down the time. What do you call it?
Oh, hourglass.
Hourglass, yeah. For when a chore should be finished. But sometimes kids like that, especially younger children like that, so they know how long they have. Oh, great. Another one, because they're low energy, acknowledge your child for sticking with a project and completing it in a timely fashion. These are all examples of how to help a child depending on their activity level, the first of the 10 traits that we've described. So as you look at your temperament worksheet that you were sent, put on there where you would fall and where one or more of your children would fall. If anybody has questions, it's okay just to jump in with them. The second level, the second trait is adaptability. How does your child adapt to others? We mentioned the 3 typical temperament styles. The child that's easygoing is the child that tends to make friends pretty easily. The child that's easygoing doesn't have severe mood swings. They tend to do pretty well. They tend to be the child that's generally upbeat, and they adjust well to others. That's the first of the 3 so we mentioned earlier of the easygoing child. The second is the slow to warm child. The slow to warm child is also called a shy child. You're out in public and you have a 4-year-old, say you're at a mall or you're at a grocery store, and you see a friend and you invite him over to meet your 4-year-old. The easygoing child's going to stand there and look at them and talk to them. The slow to warm child, the shy child, is going to stand behind the legs of the adult. They need time to adjust, to adapt to this new situation. They need to adjust to other people gradually. So to the slow to warm child, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that they're not going to be able to just say hi or to interact or establish eye contact. They definitely need more time. And that's one of the characteristics of this slow to warm child is the adaptability. They can adapt, it just takes them longer to do so. The third of the 3 types of temperament we mentioned are the spirited or feisty child. Many children who are special needs are feisty or spirited, but not all feisty or spirited children are special needs. The feisty or spirited children need the most attention and the most time because their issues are more complex. The spirited child might have trouble adapting and might never be able to adapt to that person or that situation. So as we look at adaptability, we can look at how are you influenced by what others are thinking or doing. If you're in an environment where other people are interacting, does their behavior influence you? Or do you do whatever you're going to do despite what others around you are doing or what they're thinking? So do you or does your child adapt quickly to changes, to new places, to new ideas? What are their expectations? If it's difficult to adapt, that's going to be the slow to warm child or the spirited child. The easygoing child has an easy time adapting to different people in different situations. So the fast adapting child is the easygoing child. The slow adapting child is the feisty or spirited child, and also the slow to warm or the shy child. So for a child who adapts really easily, teach him or her to make their own decisions rather than just go along with the peer group. This is especially true by the time they become adolescents. When our kids are 3, 4, and 5, we really have control over who they hang out with and who their friends are. When they're 14, 15, and 16, by then, their temperament is established. And if they're easily led or adapt too easily, they could get in trouble if their peer group does things that are not okay or unacceptable or harmful or illegal. And also encourage her to find out all she can about the activity before signing up and committing her time. Because some kids who are really easily adaptable want to sign up for a lot of activities because they like that stimulation and that excitement. For kids who are slow to adapt, they need warning about the transition. If you're taking your kids out on say a Saturday to run errands, tell the easy, and you're going to say, you're going to go to the bank and go gas up and go to the grocery store. You tell the easygoing child what the plans are and they'll be okay with that, typically. If you tell your slow to warm child, you might tell them it's okay to stay in the car if you don't want to come into the bank or you don't want to come in to the grocery store, depending on their age, obviously. But they need to know, they need to be warned that there are going to be transitions from place to place, especially like, for example, if you're running errands, because that's a lot of time when parents really can connect with their kids, where you can have those great conversations in the car or the van about what's going on and what's important in their life and in school and their friends and all of that. Another issue about when a child is slow to adapt, sometimes we can role play or practice. So for example, say your child is slow to warm or your child is spirited. You might say, well, grandma's coming in a week. How do you want to handle that when she first comes? Because the easygoing child's going to know how to do it. But the feisty or the slow to warm child might need to practice a little bit about figuring out what's going to happen. What are they going to say? What do they want the rules to be? What's going to happen when grandma comes, or whatever the new situation is. And you also want to acknowledge the stress she's feeling about the new situations and encourage her to talk about it. When kids can talk about these distressful situations, it can be very helpful when they know it's okay to bring up things they might think are not okay to bring up. The third trait is, what is their approach? What's their response to a new experience, like meeting a new person, tasting a new food, or being in a new situation? This is different from the adaptability. Adaptability is how quickly they respond to different ones. This one is their approach. What's their thinking? What's as they're focusing on it. If you have a recipe for mac and cheese, and not just out of the box, but you actually have a recipe for mac and cheese, and you change the cheese or you change the shape of the noodle, the easygoing child will just say, I'll try it, and they'll tell you if they like it or not. The slow to warm child might just sit there and sort of play with the food a little bit because it's different. It's not a new food, but it looks like a new food. And the feisty or spirited child might take quite a while before they decide to eat it or say they don't even want to try it. It's not that feisty kids are bad. It's just that they need more attention, more one-to-one time, and more opportunities to focus on their strengths so they're willing to try new things and new situations. So the best clue when we're looking at approach for ourselves or for a child is, what is our first and usual reaction to a new situation? Do we like something new? Do we like when our schedule changes? Do we like it when we have to try something different that we weren't expecting? What is the approach itself? So the quick to approach child is the easygoing or the outgoing child. The child that's slow to approach is the one that's slow to warm. It takes a while for them to adapt to a different situation. So with this in mind, for the child who approaches new situations very easily, say the easygoing child, you want to give them firm rules and supervision because they're curious. It doesn't mean they're going to, defy you, but it means they're curious. And in new situations, there could be places where they could get in trouble, like going to a park, going to a playground, going to some type of an event where there are a lot of opportunities for kids to explore. Curiosity is healthy, but they need to know what the rules are, because supervision for a 4-year-old would be different than for a 14-year-old. And the other one, for the child with approaches new situations easily, is teach him to use reasonable caution with new people or new situations. Years ago, stranger danger wasn't that big an issue. Years ago, we could more often trust people. When I was a kid many, many years ago, the danger was the Soviet Union, dropping nuclear bombs on families. So we had the duck and cover, we had the air raid shelters, we had the warnings, we had all those things. Danger was from very, very far away. Today, it can be the neighbor next door. It can be the person right down the street or even in the classroom. So we need to teach them how to be cautious around people, but not so cautious that they won't want to try new things. But for kids who easily, they really like new situations and they approach it easily, they need to know what some guidance is. For the child who withdraws, the slow to warm child, or sometimes a spirited child, give them time to adjust to a new situation. Let her set the pace of what they're going to do and encourage him without pushing to try new activities and to make new friends. Some people just make friends easier than others do. And a lot of times, clearly, it depends on the situation. Right now, with COVID and so many people having activities so restricted, it's harder to make friends in person, but it might be possible to make new friends online. But again, how we need to be cautious. Are they healthy friends or not healthy friends? The fourth trait is distractibility. How easily your thoughts or attention are interrupted by things around you. I'll ask you this. If you're working on a project, a work project or a sobriety project or a home project or a parenting project, what can distract you? Can you continue to focus, or are you easily distracted? Can a smell, can a dog barking, can a cell phone going off that's not your own but somebody else's? Are you distracted, or can you tend to focus on the task? The best clue for distractibility: are you aware or easily diverted by noises and people? Another good question about distractibility: can you distract yourself from upset feelings by redirecting your attention? When you're really upset, whether it's when you're driving or having a discussion with a family member or someone you live with, and you start feeling upset, can you distract yourself by focusing on something else? So distractibility can be negative, or we can use it sometimes as a tool to get through a tough situation. So for a low distractible child, that's typically the easygoing child. For the high distractibility, that's typically the feisty or spirited child. The slow to warm child can fall into either. There isn't necessarily a pattern for the slow to warm child, the shy child, because they could fall into either end of this. Okay, I've been doing all of the talking. What I'd like to ask now, since we've just finished the distractibility, we're going to look at how it impacts children in a minute. But I'd ask you to look at your temperament worksheet from where you are now. And do you see any patterns? Do you see anything you'd like to comment on before we continue? This is the time to interact. Come on, somebody. What do you think? Nivea?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to look for the chart.
Oh, okay. It's called the temperament worksheet.
And it was emailed to us, correct?
Yes, that should have been. If you registered, let's see. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you said you might be coming in the office. Did we?
Yeah, but I just sent her
Oh, we just,
I sent it to her.
it was sent to you earlier today, Nivea.
Okay.
There's the slides that we're working on, so you can have a copy of each of the slides we're discussing. And a separate attachment is the worksheet.
Okay. I just got off work, so I'm trying to figure it
Oh
out.
yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. We're pretty laid back when it comes to learning today, especially with the new normal. Okay, I'm gonna pick on you, Marnita. What does your worksheet look like? Yo,
Hmm?
Marnita, are you there? Are you eating?
Yeah, I should be right back.
Well, anybody there, what does your worksheet look like so far?
I
Have you,
didn't get to print it out. The printer wasn't connected good.
oh, okay. Well, you
Well,
could,
we're sitting here listening.
okay, well, you could just grab a sheet of paper and put a 1 to 10 for each of these that we do, where 1 is the low level and 10 is the high level. And you could put where you would fall on each of these and where one or more of your children would fall on each of these.
Okay.
Anybody, as you look at this, do you see any patterns that you're like more one of your children in certain areas and more like another child in other certain areas? All right, well, then we'll keep going. Under distract, okay. The coach here is saying, I'll give you a minute. What do you think, Heather?
Neil, I just had a question on this, the low distraction is, will that affect language, knowing your cultural native language and then like being shy to interact in class or things like that may also be part of it? Will that?
Absolutely, as I mentioned earlier, culture, well, the factors that I see, okay, let me make a distinction. There's temperament and then there's personality. Temperament is what every child is born with. We all were born with one of those temperaments. Personality is what shapes the child. So the adults in their lives, teachers, parents, grandparents, our personality is shaped when we're young by the interactions we have with our environment. Culture is clearly one of the most significant factors. Gender is number one. A lot of people say gender is the most significant depending on the culture, but then culture is very up there too. That culture and gender shape our personality. And so if we're born easygoing, then the 10 traits we are talking about, generally they tend to do pretty well. They're in the mid-range. For the slow to warm child or the shy child, they can fall in different areas, and we'll get into that more. But a shy child can still do very well in life. They just sometimes need to be taught a little bit more assertiveness, how to speak up for himself or herself. Sometimes a little bit more in the communication skills, so that they do speak up and have the words to say the words they need to say in the classroom or to their friends or wherever they are. And for the child that's feisty or spirited, they also can end up having a normal life. But again, with communication skills and enhancing relationship skills, but the kids that are feisty, a lot of times might have trouble making healthy relationships. So they're attracted to people that are like them who are a little different. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that at all. As long as the ones that are different aren't going to take them to a place that's dangerous or harmful or self-defeating. So the temperament is what we're born with. And all three of those temperament types can do well being taught certain skills as they're growing up. And personality, we still can affect, our personality can still be affected in adult life. Again, if there's a major health issue or a major financial issue like COVID, that personality is shaped by the interaction of the people, the culture, the gender identity, and all of that. And so, and even generational differences. We can see how our grandparents had different perspectives on communication and parenting and just the view of life that might be different from our parents. that might be different from ours, that might be different from our own children if we have grown children. That there's a difference between the temperament and personality. And personality is shaped ongoing by significant adults and situations in their lives. Does that address what you were talking about?
Yeah, so for me, I'm labeling myself as a slow child. So the
Slow,
slow
slow to
child,
warm, slow to warm, slow
oh,
to
slow
warm.
to warm,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Which means,
So I'm labeling myself that way because of the language, and I'm
sure.
not like really active and stuff. So I
sure,
have 3 boys, and one of them is kind of like my attitude, my whatever this we're talking about, this all these advantages and things.
sure,
Then my other 2 older boys are they don't. They're like the more outgoing and outspoken and things like that. But
sure.
the shy and like try to process because of the language.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
What language is it?
The Apache language.
Apache. Okay, thank you. Yeah, the culture, especially people who are going between 2 cultures, it's a major issue depending on the acceptance of the dominant culture, the white culture, accepting people from other cultures. Because, I mean, we saw in 2020 what happens with people who are hurt or killed because of the color of their skin. And obviously, if this is long-term discrimination, historical trauma clearly can affect the personality of a child. Again, we're born with the temperament, but the personality can clearly be affected by issues of discrimination, by having to adjust to going back and forth between 2 or even 3 worlds. And the support that we get, or lack of support we get going between those. That's why obviously family is so important in all of this. And that's why parents can really impact how a child can adjust to different situations. I have 2 daughters who I adopted, who are both special needs, one at birth and one from an orphanage in Bogota, Colombia, when she was 10 years old, and bringing her to the United States. So when I saw her ability to adapt and distractibility in that, first she had to learn a new language at age 10. Then she had to adapt to a totally new environment where the level of poverty wasn't what she was used to in the orphanage. And her temperament is the same, but her personality really, it allowed her to blossom because she had more opportunities. And so, as I said, going between 2 cultures or even 3 cultures can significantly impact the child's personality, their adaptability, all the 10 traits that we're talking about. Any other comments before we move on?
Just one more, Neil. if
Sure.
that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I mentioned the 3, the 2, one is like me, but the other 2 aren't. Is that kind of like normal, or would
Oh,
you
yes.
expect them
The
to be
same-
all the same?
The same mother and father can have triplets, and even the triplets can be each of the 3 different temperament types. Yes, you can have from the same family, you can have one of each, or you can have all of the same, or you can have a mix. Now, the thing is, you can also have children who are mixed. You can have a child that's easygoing and some qualities of slow to warm. You can have a child that's slow to warm with some qualities of the feisty. You don't get the easygoing and feisty together. Those 2 don't fit. But you can have children that are a combination of the other 2. And the statistics I saw, oh shoot, I don't know if I should, because it could be distracting. About 55% of children, I think they looked at like between 2000 and 2010, that 55% of children who were born during that time ended up being easygoing. 10 to 12% were slow to warm. 15 to 18% were feisty, and the others were a combination. So yes, the same parents in the same neighborhood in a very short period of time can have all 3 different temperament types. It's just, I don't know if it's DNA or what it is, but it is interesting to explore. So I'd encourage any of you, if you want to do that. Does that answer that, Heather?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. All right. For a child who's highly distractible, you don't want to have a lot of distractions. You want to reduce them as much as possible. If your child is doing homework, it's better to have them in one place where they're focusing, looking maybe at a map or a wall, not outdoors where there's a whole variation of activities, even at night. To not have a lot of other I mean, some kids learn better with like music as a background, but not if there are computer games next to it and the music and the TV and all that. That for kids who are highly distractible, it's obviously common sense. Reduce the external distractions. Keep instructions short and clear. When you're working with a child, this is especially important for boys. You want to layer instructions. When you come in the house, please take off your jacket. Once they do that, then hang up your backpack. Then take off your shoes. Instructions are short and clear. Boys' learning styles in many cultures are somewhat different than girls' learning, and they're no automatic, all boys do one and all girls do the other. But layering instructions, give them one instruction, give them time to follow that, then give them a second one. Don't give them 4 in a row. Highly distractible won't remember the third and fourth, might not even remember the second one. Use a special cue, like a gesture or word, to remind them to get back on task. You want it to be something positive, something gentle, something fun, but also pretty clear. You know, okay, looks like we've gone off track, looks like we've wandered. Time to get back to focus on the task. For the child, go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
When
it's
you
all right.
have, I have 6 children, so 2 of them are adults, and I have 4 at home.
Mhm.
I have different personalities.
Sure.
So as me being me, I have my own personality. So my rules are just the same for all of them. But how do they don't all follow the instructions like because of their personality, I'm assuming.
Sure.
Is there a way to fix it after you're set in your ways? Like how do I help the ones that have more calm personality versus somebody that has a more hard personality?
Sure.
What do you suggest?
Okay, it is possible to customize our instructions, our guidance, our discipline for different children. We know that some has to do with age. You know, like the 6-year-old might resent that the 10-year-old can stay up later than a 6-year-old. We just explained. If children understand why there's some distinctions, it seems fair to them. If you base it on gender, it doesn't seem to be fair anymore because it may not be. But if it's based on age, he can stay up a little later than you can because he's 4 years older. If children understand that it's something that they're going to be able to earn, it's like boys can do this and girls can't. Girls can't be boys and boys can't be girls. But if it's something where it's part of the natural growth process, I think children understand that more, and they're willing to. They can internalize and go, yeah, in a few years. When I'm that old, then I'll be able, and it isn't just time to go to bed. It can be all kinds of things. Opportunities to be left alone in the house, opportunities to care for younger brothers and sisters, opportunities to stay out a little later, or to try risky behavior like riding the bike to the end of the corner or whatever. A lot of it has to do with not just their age, but their developmental level, because we know that some children mature earlier than others. In the dominant culture in the United States, girls tend to mature earlier than boys in many European American cultures. That girls mature earlier, their speech and language develops sooner. Younger girls have an easier time of learning a second language than young boys do. It just has to do, partly it has to do with brain development. When a baby is born, a newborn baby, their brain develops from the center out, from the bottom to the top, from the back to the front. The last part of the human brain that develops is right behind the forehead. The prefrontal cortex, we don't need to get into a lot of that, but right behind the forehead is the most important part, because those are called executive functions. These are things like planning, understanding consequences of behavior, problem solving, and ethical decision making. In the human female, they mature on average in females around 22 or 23 for that last part of the brain to develop. They don't develop maturely in males until around 26 or 27. This is why we tend to see young males engaging in more dangerous behavior. Well, part of it has to do with the testosterone versus the estrogen, but also it has to do with brain development.
Just hit stop the record.
Yeah, I got that. Thanks, Valerie. Valerie's going to go home and be with her family. She's the techie here. I'm not the techie. I tell people I'm a Trekkie, not a techie. So when we understand how, that when children are receptive to learning new things, we don't want to use, we have to respect their differences in gender, but a lot of times we don't want to base privileges on that, because that can limit both our sons and our daughters in a whole lot of ways. But I would say when they understand why we're asking them to do something, when we talk to children and ask them to be our ally, to be on our side, the technique that we used with our daughter, I mentioned Hannah, our daughter's 24, we adopted her at birth, and her birth mom used a lot of chemicals, alcohol in her system. So we knew Hannah would be pretty medically clobbered, and she was early on. We tailored our approach to disciplining Hannah with making her our ally. When she was about 8, I'd go in her bedroom, and if I just said, we're going to clean your room, because Asperger children have huge mood swings, that wouldn't work. I'd say, honey, in about a half hour, I'm going to come in with a box and I'm going to help you, and we're going to organize your room a little better. I'm on her side. I'm not telling her what to do, even though as an adult, I need to. I bring the box in, I'd say, put in here what you want to donate, or put in here what you've outgrown or whatever. And I'd say, tell me what I can do to help. That approach, that we're her ally, we're on your side. Another way to do it is when things are calm in the household, ask kids, when this happens and it's not working very well, what do you think we should do? Ask them how they think they should be disciplined, but not at a high stress time. This is at a time like at a family meeting or just over dinner in the evening, and saying, yesterday when we both had this argument and we both were highly stressed and it didn't work very well, what do you think would be a way? Now, you can't do it with a 2-year-old, but what do you think would be better when I asked you to do the laundry and you started yelling at me and then I had you go to your room? What would work better? Ask them for their ideas. When they buy in, they're more invested in the outcome. They're more willing to try what you do. Now, it's not saying whatever you suggest, I'll accept, but it is asking for suggestions. It isn't saying, if you tell me this, I'm going to do it, but you're saying, I want things to be better than they are now. What can we do to make things better? And we do that in low stress times, and it tends to work better than you don't do it at high stress times at all. Again, does that make sense?
Yes, it is.
Okie doke. I was on keep instructions short and clear, and I just gave you a very long answer to your question. But as I said, it's layering. It's giving one instruction, let them do it, then do the next one, let them do that, then do the next one. Again, these are ways that tend to work with younger children.
Okay. Well, I have another question. I have a teenage daughter, and when I ask her, what works for you, because sometimes she takes the role of, she's the oldest one at home, and she's like, well, she'll take her time doing her chores, but yet we expect all of them to finish at the same time.
Sure.
But when I ask her, okay, what would make you want to do your chores? She blocks. She stays quiet. She won't. When she feels like you're coming to her to get a resolution or get something resolved, she'll just close down.
Yeah.
How do I get her to open up?
Yeah, that might just be a stage where she is right now, and the reluctance might be because she wants to be thought of as intelligent, and she doesn't have what she thinks an intelligent response. It might be that she doesn't really know, or it might be that she just wants to continue this approach because this has worked for her. People don't change until there's a benefit for the change to occur. Like people don't quit smoking until there's more benefit to quit smoking than to continue smoking. People don't tend to want to go on a diet until they really see the benefit of, there's going to be a benefit by my losing weight. I'm going to feel healthier and have more energy and just feel better. So kids change, well, people change when there's more benefit for the change to occur than to continue as is. There's an old saying that the only ones that really like change are wet babies, because a lot of family members tend to not like change because they don't know what's going to happen or they're uncomfortable with the whole idea. Feisty kids tend to not like change at all. So I would say I don't have a really good answer for that, unless it could be transitional. Maybe in a few months, it might start working again. Okay,
Thank you.
sure. For a child who's low distractibility, cue him when it's time to move on to something new, like say her name or touch his arm. Or set a timer when it's time to move on to the next task or activity. Low distractibility, when you're really focusing on a task, that's can be a task around the house, a job they've got to do, a chore. It can be having to do with homework, it can be do all kinds of things. The fifth one is emotional sensitivity. Remember I mentioned there were two components to emotional sensitivity. The emotional sensitivity is the emotional response to situations, our own feelings and sensitivity to others. So we're going to look at both. Do you often become upset over nothing? Or do you rarely become upset even when circumstances suggest that you should? People with a really short fuse are highly emotionally sensitive. It's not always good to do that in school or in work or in other situations where you have to be productive and to fit in. So first is emotional sensitivity to self. Some people don't really know how they're feeling. They're insensitive to their own feelings. The other end of the spectrum, as I mentioned, that worksheet, you just have a sheet of paper in front of you with 1 to 10. Would you say, are you really insensitive? You don't really know often how you're feeling, or are you really highly sensitive and you wear your feelings on your sleeve and you can get easily upset over nothing? Unaware of emotions versus feeling your own emotions strongly. Now this is towards self. Then there's the other half that's emotional sensitivity toward others. I mentioned my daughter, Hannah, has Asperger's. Kids, adolescents, and adults say whatever's on their mind. They don't filter their feelings. Some people say that's being honest. It can really hurt others. A few years ago, my sister brought over something for Thanksgiving, and it was the stuffing. And it was really good stuffing, the stuff you stuff inside the turkey. And my sister asked how I liked it. I said, I loved it. My wife said she loved it. And Hannah said, you used the wrong herbs and spices. Well, that didn't go over very well with my sister. Hannah was being honest in her opinion, but she was insensitive to how others would respond to her comments. Others are highly sensitive and they only say the nicest things and they want to be pleasing and want to really fit in. Now, again, these can be cultural, part of our culture and what we're taught on respect for elders, what we're taught about how to respond as young adults or whatever it is. But the idea of emotional sensitivity is tuned into ourselves and tuned into others. So, mostly tuned out or emotionally tuned in. So for the child who shows high sensitivity, where they really are sensitive and don't want to hurt other people's feelings and they're very aware of them, acknowledge their feelings and provide ways to make her feel more comfortable. For also high sensitivity, it can also be reflected in the temperature, and also avoid overstimulation, loud music, strobe lights, noisy groups of people. Kids who are highly sensitive, we don't want to put them in environments where the more stimulation, it really is very difficult for them to adapt and to focus. For the child who has low sensitivity, help them notice external cues by pointing out sounds in the environment or odors or changes in the colors of the stoplight. I mean, simple things, but they can be instructive in helping kids understand that and recognize themselves how sensitive they are, especially if they're low sensitivity. And explain interpersonal cues, reading body language and facial expressions and personal space. I don't know if you know, but if you ever had a person that was a close talker, they come right up to you really close and don't have that sense of personal space. That shows that they're not very sensitive to how other people are feeling and their comfort levels. And so kids need to learn to be sort of fall in the middle, not too sensitive and not totally unsensitive. Intensity is the next one. How much energy do we put into expressing emotions? So for yourself or for one of your children, how physically dramatic, fierce, or passionate are you in expressing strong feelings? Do other people find you easy or hard to read? How intense do we respond to things? Low intensity is the slow to warm child tends to have mild reactions to different situations. And also the easygoing child. For the high intensity, very dramatic, they fall on the floor and they start screaming, or their response isn't proportionate to the situation. Those tend to be the feistier spirited child. So for the child who's overly responsive, teach her to control the emotional responses, anger management skills, self-talk. Self-talk is really important. We all have self-talk. We have self-talk when we're under distress. We have our self-talk when we're sad. We have self-talk when we're angry, when we're happy. We have things we say to ourselves. And if we can help our kids understand their self-talk, that can be very helpful. And also teaching calming strategies. We know the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be teaching a course called Anger Management for Parents, the same night, Tuesday nights, for the next 3 weeks, the 12th and 19th and the 26th. And one of the things that we talk about are calming strategies and anger management skills. It doesn't work to tell someone to calm down when they're upset. 99% of the time they escalate it. So calming strategies are not just saying calm down. For the child who's overly responsive, help prepare the child for transitions from one environment to another. Tell them what they're going to need to do when school ends or when school starts or if something big's coming up this weekend. How do they prepare for that? And again, limit overstimulating situations, pulsating noises and types of things. Because if they're overly responsive, it's like the previous one that's overly sensitive. For kids that don't respond much, don't think that because they don't respond, they don't feel. They just don't respond the same way. The slow to warm child is this one. The slow to warm child tends to have, a slow to warm child can tend to take care of themselves. They don't need a lot of interaction with others. They might go off and play with themselves, by themselves for a while. There isn't much intensity, but that doesn't mean they don't have feelings. It's just that they show it differently than other children. And listen carefully to pick up more subtle clues, because they might have problems, but they might not be willing to talk about it as much. Persistence, number 7. The length of time a person will continue to make an effort, especially when tasks get difficult. Do they stick to things even when they're frustrated? Can they stop an activity when asked to do so? Highly persistent child will get locked in. The low persistent child will stop easily. Now, this is related to distractibility, but persistence is the ability to want to keep attending to tasks, even when things get difficult. So for the child who's overly persistent, they need to know when there's going to be a transition, that in 10 minutes, we're going to stop doing this activity and start doing this one. Remind him that it's not always possible to be perfect. Some kids who are really persistent do so to do the job really well. And if they're perfectionistic, that can be good at sometimes, but it can also be really emotionally and physically draining at other times. And for children who are overly persistent, have them prioritize what's the most important thing they need to do, and then be persistent with that. And maybe some of the other tasks are not as important. With a child who's low persistence, baby steps. A child might not be able to do a homework assignment, but if you break it into baby steps, if you're teaching a child to tie their shoes or to brush their teeth or to help wash the dishes or do the laundry, break them into baby steps. And as I said, have them do one task, then have them do the next, and acknowledge the small successes, because first time for a complex task, it's usually not going to achieve 100% with each baby step. Try timed work periods and then give them short breaks. But they do need to have a task at hand and say, you need to try this for 15 minutes and then we'll take a break. One thing you can do about that is, in some families, they limit screen time. They have to earn screen time by doing tasks first, doing the chores or homework first. And for low persistence, reward her for sustained efforts and when she finishes her assignments. Quality of mood is number 8. The amount of pleasant, friendly behavior is contrasted with unpleasant or unfriendly behavior. Are they generally upbeat or downbeat? Is their first response to a new situation no or yes? Are they more optimistic or more pessimistic? Are they more lighthearted or more serious? So kids who are in a positive mood are generally carefree. This is the easygoing child. The negative mood is the one that a lot of times feisty kids or spirited kids can be in a negative mood. Now, you want to make a distinction. If the child generally has a negative mood because they have a special need and they're picked on, they're bullied, they're made to be seen as so different that they don't fit in well, that can reflect a negative mood in response to environmental factors because they're special needs. We see a lot of kids who are special needs who are not accepted by the ones who are supposedly the leaders or the ones that are more admired, whether they tend to be the jocks or the smart ones or whatever. So negative mood can be based on what's going on in their life at that time. But we really want that. So it's important to understand why they might be that way. One of the things we used to ask our kids and our foster children, we've been foster parents for the past 25 years, is we'll say, if you ask a kid, how was school today? They come up with a 4-letter word, fine. But if you say, what was the best thing that happened to you at school today? And have them answer that. What was the best thing that happened to you today outside of school? Have them focus on something where they have to actually scan and think of something positive. It's not minimizing the negative, but it's helping them recognize that there could be more positive things than they think. And if they start thinking about it, talking about it, they can realize, that was really neat. I think I made a new friend today. I think I did better in my schoolwork than I thought I did. I think I accomplished this thing that I didn't realize how important it was, and now it is important. And so it's helping them to recognize the positive situations in their life. Part of that, again, is reflected in their self-talk. For a child who's always positive, watch for subtle signs of unhappiness that she can be bottling up. If she's generally seen as easygoing and optimistic, she might think she can't show that bad side, especially if it's sort of a busy family and there are other kids running around. Because easygoing children can sort of fall through the cracks because parents and caregivers and grandparents tend to focus on the ones that are the spirited and feisty or the shy ones. And then also for kids who are positive, Teach appropriate ways to express feelings of sadness, anger, fear, and frustration. One of the things that I encourage parents to do is we don't talk about positive and negative feelings. If a child hears the term negative feelings like sadness, anger, fear, or frustration, they might think they can't show those. So what we encourage parents to talk about is comfortable and uncomfortable feelings. If you have an uncomfortable feeling, it could be sadness, anger, fear, frustration, but that doesn't make it negative. It just might mean that temporarily it's uncomfortable for you right now. So again, it's how we approach these with our children.
Neil, I have a question on that one.
Sure.
So like you mentioned that on the negative mood, and then it usually from bullying, being bullied or a bully, and
Yeah.
does that affect them like the long term, or will you be able to train the child and the students?
It can affect them if it's long-term and persistent, and they don't see that they have allies. They don't see that other kids in the school or other friends or support them. If nobody challenges the behavior in the administration or the teachers or the staff, and if it's long-term, especially if they feel isolated, this might have been why we see some school shootings. It doesn't necessarily so, but if you look at every single school shooting we've had in the United States, Columbine being one of the big ones, but there've been even bigger, they were all male and they all involved a weapon. And almost all of them involved being picked on or bullied or being seen as different and not in a positive way. Being seen, you can be seen as different in a positive way, like a brilliant person or a very talented person. But if it's persistent and long-term, then it can lead to that downward spiral where they might see they have no other options. That's why mentoring programs and other opportunities for children to share what's going on and to tune in and engage in activities. If they can engage in activities with other people and be accepted, whether in the school or the Boys and Girls Clubs or in the neighborhood or the playground or the community, as long as they're given opportunities where, because bullying can occur in just, like in one situation, like in 6th grade when they're starting to sort of mature a little bit. And it can be outgrown. They can find ways where others will help minimize that impact of the bullying by having friends and supports. But if it's long-term, then that really can result, that downward spiral can be if they see that nobody really appreciates them and things are not getting better, then it can be more harmful in long-term. Also, should notice that in many cultures, boys bully differently than girls. When girls bully, they tend to do it in a group. It's a group of girls who tend to be doing well in school. They're socially acceptable. They pick on one person that they know pretty well, and it tends to be emotional abuse, castigating them, pushing them out of the picture, saying there's something wrong with them. They're not pretty enough or smart enough or whatever. When boys bully, male bullies tends to be one or a couple guys. They tend not to be doing well in school. They tend to be outcasts. They're not part of the norm. They're not part of the mainstream. They're very much outsiders. And they pick on people they don't necessarily know very well, but they might pick on them because of a disability or skin color or some other arbitrary thing they pick on. But boys tend to not know them very well and just pick on them to be mean. And a lot of times male bullying tends to be physical, and females who bully tends to be more emotional and isolating a girl. And actually nowadays with the social media, it can be even more harmful. That makes sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. For a child who tends to have sort of a negative mood, try to ignore the general mood, but tune into real distress. My daughter's that way. Aspie kids tend to be seen as, they see the world as not dangerous, but just not a really great place to be in. And so we would tune into things that are really going to be harmful. But generally, if she's in a negative mood, if that's what she wants to feel, we can still try and focus on positive things. What I would ask her each night is, besides like, what's the best thing that happened to you today, is what's something coming up that you're looking forward to? People who are in a negative mood, especially children, if you give them something to look forward to that they like, grandma or grandpa's coming to visit, we're going on a vacation. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be just Saturday, we're going to go to the park and try something, or going to go to a ball game, something. But it's not minimizing it, but it's not also focusing on that negative mood. Encourage her to talk and recognize about things that make her happy. As I mentioned, what's something you're looking forward to. And act as a role model for positive social interactions. When if our mood is also down, they can detect that and reflect that. And it's not saying we don't have the right to feel down, but if one of our kids is sort of a sponge or a magnet to that, we're the adults. So again, we need to take some responsibility in looking at what can we do to help them realize that it's okay to be down, but that doesn't have to affect our whole day, our whole outlook. There's some things that we can do to change that and to make things better. Number 9, regularity. How predictable are when it comes to when they're eating, hunger and thirst, our sleep cycles, and elimination, going to the bathroom. Young children can have all kinds of cycles. It's as we get a little older. It doesn't mean we have to do it on a regular basis. Just that's part of the traits that 10 traits we're talking about that have to do with temperament. The best clue: do you tend to want to go to bed or wake up or want meals about the same time every day? Do you get hungry about the same time every day? With hunger, at the same time, or a regular eater? With sleep, does it have to be, are we tired on a regular schedule? Or, some days we need a nap and other days we don't. And also it has to do with elimination. Do we tend to go to the bathroom about the same time? Again, there isn't a preferred pattern, but it's just part of our whole total makeup. How is our body chemistry? How is our biological clock working? And we need to then be able to take responsibility ourselves as we get older for all of those. So for a child, regularity, what happened here? Okay. For a child who's highly predictable, I guess that predictability has to do with, I changed a little bit of this. I just caught up there. Predictability when it comes to our body rhythms. If our body is going through changes, it can be normal as just what we're going through as part of our growth cycle. Help her learn to handle changes, to develop flexibility as she gets older, that this is what's going to happen. For low predictability, routines. Sit down for family dinner even if she's not hungry, or go to bed at regular time even if she's not sleepy. The idea of this is we still need to be able to have a somewhat normal cycle on our day, because most families, that we have, in my opinion, we have 5 routines. We have the breakfast routine, early morning routine is the first one, the after school routine, the dinner time routine, the bedtime routine, and then the weekend routine. And routines are very important for children, especially when families are in flux, whether it has to do with COVID, whether it has to do with a new family member moving in, if we're losing our housing, if things are going on, that routines are very important for children. So asking them to be with the family, we do this with our daughter, and for a while she didn't understand. Now she just, even when she's not hungry because of her cycle and she's 24, she'll still sit with the rest of us. And then again, for low predictability when it comes to our body functions, reward successes. Sensory awareness. That's the 10th one. Our 5 senses. How sensitive are we to pain, touch, taste, temperature, smells, hearing, and sight? The best clue, how aware are you of noises or temperature changes or lights or odors or flavors or textures? How do you respond to pain? Some children are very sensitive to certain clothing. When I was growing up as a kid, which was a long time ago, some kids couldn't wear corduroy. I don't think I've seen anybody wearing corduroy lately, but there were certain things that people would respond different ways through the five senses. And we want to respect those for our children, especially. So for pain, one of the responses, some might be what nail in my foot. The others can be they over exaggerate when it comes to pain. Light touch, you might see this with siblings when they're fighting or arguing with each other, and they'll do something light touch and they'll try to overemphasize it or something, but they don't react at all to contact, or they're easily irritated or easily pleased. When it comes to taste, some kids can't taste the difference between different types of foods. And others will notice a very tiny variation. I mentioned before how we might have a recipe for mac and cheese, and one child might say it doesn't matter, another one might notice and say it's okay, and the third one might say I'm not going to eat this because of that. Sensitivity, according to our senses, can be very impactful for some children. Some kids don't notice odors. Others might be a human bloodhound. Hearing or sound, don't notice noise, are very sensitive. So one of the reasons this is important with the sound, the smell, the temperature, all of those things, the light, when we're setting up a situation for homework, do different kids have different sensitivities? Does one need a lot more light and very quiet? Another one can have more auditory stimulation, but not able to do much in the other areas. Visually insensitive versus visually sensitive. All of these have to do with how our five senses impact our learning, our communication, our awareness of the world, and how we react to the world around us. So for the child who's highly sensitive, acknowledge their feelings and provide ways to help her make herself more comfortable. Again, layer clothing, depending on the temperature. Avoid overstimulation for those who are highly sensitive. For those that are low sensitive, help her look for external cues by pointing out sounds in the environment or odors or changes in the colors. Again, children who are low sensitive, we want to give them opportunities to learn to recognize those different clues in their environment and how that's going to impact their behavior, their attitude, and their learning style. And then explain interpersonal cues, again, like we mentioned before. Low sensitivity, how to interpret body language. What's that person telling you? What's your sibling telling you? And how you're responding to different situations. So for the easygoing child, their characteristics are they're easygoing during transition. Now a transition can be a small one. If they're in, even beside COVID, if they come home from school and now they're home, that's a transition from the classroom to home. They can handle transition pretty easily. They have pretty predictable biological rhythms if you're an easygoing child or an adult. They can get upset, but they're not huge mood swings. They generally have a positive mood and an attitude toward the world. Their mood swings are low intensity. You don't see the big ones. They can soothe pretty easily. One of the most important skills a child can learn is to self-soothe. 2-year-olds have a tough time self-soothing, but as children get older, they need to be able to self-soothe. Mentioned earlier that are they able to refocus on something and able to calm themselves down? And so they're easily soothable. They're not highly distractible, and they don't have big spikes in sensitivity with the sensory stimuli. So for the slow to warm child, this is the shy child, their characteristics, they're slow to adapt, and they might react negatively to new environments and new routines and activities. They're relatively inactive and fussy. The slow to warm child isn't real busy. They tend to just have quiet times. Like I said, they might be able to entertain themselves for quite a while, They're fussy, but they don't necessarily ask for a whole lot of attention when they do that. They're not as irregular as the feisty temperament children are. The slow to warm temperament, they're somewhat sensitive to different sensory stimuli, but usually it's just one, like sight or sound or smell or touch or taste. They have mild responses to emotional reactions. If they get sad, it's relatively mild. If they get angry, it's a relatively mild response. They're a moderately negative mood in the beginning, but once they're relaxed, once they adapt to their situation, their mood can come up. They're not persistent in task, but they might be hesitant to start the task. And the feisty or spirited temperament, these characteristics, they need time to adapt to new routines. They have irregular bodily rhythms, biological rhythms. They're highly sensitive to certain sensory stimuli. Their reactions, they have higher highs and lower lows when the intensity to stressors or to different situations. Their mood is often fussy, but it can also be high-strung, and high-strung kids can impact their sibling behavior in the home or in the classroom. Feisty kids tend to be highly persistent. They can focus on tasks for a long time, and they're not easily distractible. So those are somewhat related. So some suggestions for discipline, for as a parent for a child or grandchild. For easygoing children, here are some tips. Even though the child isn't demanding because they tend to fit in and be quiet and do well, we need to tune into them and check in, because I said these are the kids that can fall through the cracks, because the other two temperament types tend to take more time and attention from parents or teachers. These kids are easily overlooked or ignored, and they can be at risk for negative influence. So watch who they hang with. Look at who their friends are. They need structure in their environment and a daily routine to build a sense of security. For easygoing children, positive reinforcement. Show them what's going on in a positive way and reinforce when they're doing well. State clear expectations. Redirection is a discipline style that works for, in my experience, for kids of all ages. Help them focus on a different topic rather than the one that might be stressful. Role model the behaviors we expect for them when we're stressful, when we're under stress ourselves, when we're communicating with them, when we're feeling really stressed. They're going to see how we respond, and they're the easiest ones that will mirror our behavior. And then use natural and logical consequences. Natural consequence just will occur in a situation. A natural response to a child not studying is they might fail a test. Now, we don't want them to fail the test, but that is an example of a natural consequence. A logical consequence has where the behavior is directed to the consequence. If a child leaves toys out and we trip on them or they keep getting in the way, we might put them up on a high shelf for a few days and say, you're going to lose use of this toy for 3 days because I've asked you before not to leave it right out in the middle of the living room. That's a logical consequence. They lose the toy, be able to play that toy for a few days or that screen time for a certain amount of time because they violated something that's logically connected to that. Don't go to extremes with easygoing children, yelling and power struggles. Just avoid them at all, but especially with them. Continue to provide opportunities for exploration of new activities and places. Otherwise, these kids are going to get bored. For the slow to warm child, for the shy child, parenting style should include creating a structured environment. They know what's going on. There are limits, there are parameters for what's to do. Routine days, they know what's going to happen if they're at home because of COVID and they're not in school. Slow to warm children need to know what's going on. You might have a whiteboard or a sheet of paper, or you print out something from your computer. This is what is a routine, what we're going to do. We're going to have certain time for homework, and then for a break, and then for a snack, and then to outdoor activity if the weather allows it. But have routine days so that they need to know what's coming next. They really need to know what's coming next. Provide reminders for changes in expectations. Don't spring it on them. If somebody's coming to visit or if there's going to be a change in the routine, don't spring it on them. If you know ahead of time, let them know. Don't have a lot of external stimulations. Allow them time to adjust to a newness with gentle encouragement. You know, when grandpa comes this weekend, this is what we're going to do. I want you to help me with this and this. So he or she's able to help, and they see that they're an asset and that they're an ally of us. When we're offering choices, only give them two choices. You know, do you want peas or beans for dinner tonight? Do you want to wear your red shirt or your blue shirt to school today? Children who are shy and slow to warm, don't give them five or six choices. It overwhelms them, and it'll take them time and frustrate them. And some kids like a reward system. A reward system can be a star chart. It can be stickers, but it can be just if you do these certain things today, this is what we'll do as a reward. And then again, redirection works, as I said, with children of all types. 4, slow to warm children, break complex tasks into baby steps, have consistent consequences, be really consistent. The slow to warm and the feisty kids really need consistent consequences. Every time this happens, if you violate it, this is going to be the consequence. They need to know what the consequence is ahead of time, but be consistent. Slow to warm kids need the adults to be patient. Look for cues. If you can see that your child's getting tired or hungry, look for those cues, because that's going to impact their behavior. Exhibit and expect empathy. Slow to warm kids generally are empathetic toward others, and they need it themselves. And use praise or encouragement. I'd say here use encouragement, because praise is about the behavior. Encouragement is about who they are. Don't force them into activities unless it's absolutely necessary. Don't push them to go too fast. Don't have unrealistic expectations for their age level. And avoid lack of structures. They need structure in their environment. And ways to change the environment to fit your child's needs. For the feisty child, they need a structured environment. These kids need the most attention. They can do well as adults. They just need a lot of support in relationship skill building and communication skill building, and all kinds of ways to support them as they mature. Provide reminders for changes in expectations. If you can, ignore minor negative attention-seeking behavior. If there's small behaviors that are annoying, if you can just ignore it, try to do so. Catch them doing something good. Acknowledge positive behavior. I really appreciate that you helped clear the table tonight. I really appreciate that you brought your laundry into the laundry room. I really appreciate how you helped your little sister just now. Provide consistent discipline and guidance. Consistency is very important for feisty children. Positive redirection. Have them go from one thing that we don't want them to do to something that's positive for them and that we want to see them do. Try to not use the word no a lot. I mean, we might have to when they're very young, but redirecting is saying no. Don't bounce the basketball. Say, please put the basketball on the table and help me set the table. Something like that. Give reasons. They're going to want to know. Feisty kids want to know why they have to do certain things. Teach and model appropriate emotional responses. Don't have a lot of stimulation. Expect clear parent and child roles. You're not the friend to this child. You are the adult. It can be your ally, but you're the parent, they're the child. Offer physical expressions of support. Feisty kids a lot of times need hugs. They need support of all kinds, that they're loved. And give warnings ahead of time so they don't feel you're springing it on them. So here's some ways to see our kids. Our feisty child isn't necessarily feisty, but she's adventurous, explorative, passionate, and ready to go. Think of your slow to warm child as he's cautious, observant, sensitive, and very aware of their surroundings. Think of your easygoing child as charismatic, tuned into their environment, easy to please, and they give subtle cues for attention. Here's some labels. Remember I talked about labels and how we want to go avoid labels? Well, instead of being rude, they're honest. I mentioned that about Asperger kids. Instead of saying a child has a bad attitude, that we know he knows what he wants. Instead of being distractible, they're very perceptible. Rather than being stubborn, they're independent. Difficult to spirited, willful to strong, oversensitive to very responsive, overactive to energetic, and wild to very busy. So again, how do we engage? How do we use terms that support our kids in this transition as they're growing up? Use natural consequences instead of punishment. Well, always want to avoid punishment. We want to use discipline. Feisty kids will benefit from parents announcing transitions. Slow to warm kids need some extra time and encouragement for new activities. You might need to back away slowly once the child is adapted. Easygoing children will need consistent physical and visual connections to check in, even if they're not asking for it. So, all of this has been presented in a relatively short period of time. I've been doing all the talking. So again, I'm going to ask for either questions or feedback. Does these 3 temperament types and these 10 traits from low to high, do these fit in your world? And do you see how this information might be helpful to you and your family? Hello. Heather?
Yeah, I kind of don't want to label the kids and the students, but I see where this is going on their, like you said, temperament styles and their types.
Yes. Okay.
And then yeah, I don't want to really like label, and I see that though, what
Sure. Okay.
kids are going through.
Okay. Nivea, do you have any comments?
No, I also see where the temperaments are going, and I see a lot of what you just mentioned in quite a few of my children.
So does this information, can you see how this can apply in your world?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Good. Okay. Marnita?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still kind of far from the computer, so I had to jump up.
Oh, that's fine. Does any of this, can you find any of this helpful that you can use with your 3?
Yeah, I do. It was pretty good. It made me realize how I can work with them, and it's okay that they're not all on the same emotional level.
Okay, sure. When any of you looked at your temperament worksheet from low to high, was it easy to put you there or your children there? What do you think, Ferlin? Ryan, what do you think?
Hold on, here.
What was the question?
The temperament. Remember you were asking about that to see how he was asking. He had a question, but it was about whether he can change it up with his kids.
Is it interchangeable between, because I only have one kid she's already 13 though, but.
Oh yeah, you can still impact a child at 13. Yes, absolutely. As you look at the temperament worksheet, or just do, on your own scale from 1 to 10 for each of these 10 traits, if you see that you're pretty close to some of them, say you're both a 4 or 5 on approach or on activity level, that's where you could start in connecting with them, and then thinking of what are activities you could do together. If there are differences, you can also point out the differences, because sometimes kids love hearing about that. One of the ways to really connect with kids is tell them stories of when you were younger. So if you were to look at some of the characteristics of the 10 traits and say, this is what you were like when you were younger. I find a lot of children enjoy hearing about their parents telling them what they were like when they were younger. And then they can see if that fits in their world for them. I'm like you on this way, mom or dad, and I'm different on this way for you, mom or dad. I do think, yeah, at 13, you can still really have an influence in letting them express themselves, where they fall and what are the things they want to work on. Because one of the things you can look at is you look at this temperament worksheet, you can look at where you fall on any of these 10 areas and say, are there any where you'd like to be different? Or would you like to be lower or higher on any of these 10? And ask your kids the same thing. I mean, it doesn't have to be on a worksheet, but we can think of examples of behavior and say, when this happens, is this what you want to continue to see happen? My daughter, I mentioned Hannah. Hannah's got some very severe mood swings, even at 24. And I've talked to her from time to time about how she'd like to see her world be a little different. If she could make some changes over the next few years, not weeks or months, think they have to do it fast. If you could see some changes over the next few years, what would you like to see change? And she says, well, I'd like to be able to tell people how I feel without making them feel bad. That's a big self-awareness. And if she can do that, which I believe she can, that would be wonderful. So we can take this information from these slides and come up with some suggestions for ourselves or suggestions that we'd encourage our children to pursue, or to help the other parent if we're co-parenting, if we're doing it as a pair or a team. How can we together help our kids? Because there are certain areas I can help my daughter with, and there are other areas that my wife can help Hannah with. And that's just enriching. That gives her even more opportunities and us more opportunities to help her get to where she wants to be. Any other comments from anyone?
When you say you're a 24-year-old, like now that you say that, like I look at now all of them, and there's like 3 or 4 that are exactly like me. And
Okay.
but not in the sense of like my change now. Like at their young age, in their early 20s, they mirror me at my early 20s.
Oh, okay, sure. All right.
So, but now that I'm early 40s, like I'm trying to turn a page on where I'm trying to head.
Sure.
So they're listening, but not really listening because they're still.
Well, yeah. That can be a sensitive area, but it still can be something we can choose to try and work on. To say, when I was at your age, these are some of the things that were important to me. And these are some of the things that worked well for me. And these are some of the things that didn't work well for me. And we don't have to present them all at once, obviously, but we can give specific. I do think kids of all ages like to hear stories from their parents, especially if they can learn something from it. And we can tell them, that when I was your age, I did this and this happened and I wish it hadn't, or this is what I learned and this is how it benefited me. But I do think that even in their 20s, we can still influence children in positive ways or in negative ways, and in comfortable ways and uncomfortable ways. And I'd say, think of a way that would work for that child, that young adult's temperament and personality. So they're probably not going to reject it, but might be open to hearing it, because we're not trying to scare them or make them do something, but hope that at this age, the self-awareness will be at a place where they're going to want to make some changes for the better because they're choosing to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there are no more comments, I want to thank you all for joining us. I mentioned the next 3 weeks is doing the anger management for parents sessions 1, 2, and 3. You can attend 1, 2, or all 3 of them. They'll be in person here or online. And if you're interested, again, Valerie's the one that handles the registration, and she can send you the information. And I will send you the worksheets and the slides so that you can have that information if you want to join us.
There they are. They're sitting way in the corner.
Now I see. Now you guys are comfortable.
Yeah, we were enjoying the class, so that's why we were running back and forth this way.
No, that's fine. I'm glad to hear it for you. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And please stay safe and Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too. Happy New Year, Neil.
All right. Bye, everyone.
And have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you for class. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Nivea. Bye, Winnie.
Bye. Have a good night. Thank you for the class.
You bet. Say goodnight, Dick.